these are the first 10 problems on the 2019 May SAT. So number one, we'll go through the easier ones faster. This one says, in the equation above, A is a constant. For which of the following values of A will the equation have no solution? Well, if we put in 0 for A, 0 times anything is 0. 0 cannot equal 5, so the answer to this one is 0. If you put the other values in, there's possible values for X that would make it true. Number two, it's just an equation to solve. So let's go through and solve this equation real quick. This is a standard Algebra 1 problem, so this is very doable. The only thing is, on these easier problems, make sure you take your time, get it right, because an easy problem is worth the same value as a difficult problem. And we're going to get X equals negative 23 over 7. And you might already be panicking because you have 2 A's for your first 2 answers. Number 3, this is a function problem which kind of scares some of you. So this one really should have a line running between 2 and 1, 4 and 7, 6 and 13. So this is a table of values. It says for the linear function h, the table shows several values of x and their corresponding values of h of x. The thing to keep in mind is it's the same thing as x, y table. The h of x is the same, the function notation is always the same as the y coordinate. So all I'm going to do is plug my x values into these equations and see if I get the appropriate y values out. I'll do a couple of these, but it's fairly straightforward. So I'm going to put the 2 in here. 2 times 2 is 4. 4 minus 3 is 1. So far that worked. You need to try all of these to make sure that it works. So I'm going to put a 4 in. 2 times 4 is 8, minus 3 is 5. Well, it's a 7. So right away we can cross this one out. We move on to the next one. As soon as one of them does not work, you can cross it out. So when I put these in to the second one, if I put a 2 in, 2 times 3 is 6, 6 minus 5 is 1. Putting the x value, which is 4, into where the x is. 3 times 4 is 12, 12 minus 5 is 7. 6 times 3 is 18, 18 minus 5 is 13. 8 times 3 is 24, 24 minus 5 is 19. So this is your solution to that one. See how we're quickly going through the first ones. The next one, Terrence's car contains 8 gallons of fuel. He plans to drive the car m miles using the fuel currently in the car. If he can drive 20 miles per gallon, which inequality gives him a possible value for m? And it says he plans to drive the car, so he can't drive more than the amount. So the way that I did it is he has 8 gallons of gas, 8 gallons, and he plans to drive it, so we're figuring out how much fuel he needs, times 20 miles, because we're trying to figure out miles per gallon, or we're trying to figure out m miles. We're trying to figure out how many miles he can drive. So the gallons are going to cross out, so it's going to be 8 times 20 miles, and it has to be less than that because he can't use more than he has, so this is the solution. Okay, hopefully when you get the solutions to these tests, they tell you if they're the difficulty level. I don't have all of them written out, but this one was medium difficulty. The first ones would have been easy. All right, the next one, scroll down here. I think that's it. All right, let's go to the next one. Number 5. These are parallel lines, so you are using your geometry here. So it has this figure. It says, in the figure, line T, which is the transversal, intersects lines L and K. Which of the following statements, if true, would imply that their L and K are parallel? So we have to look at the 2 lines that we're thinking are parallel. I think I can blow this up a little bit for you. Okay, so we're trying to get L and K parallel. So if lines are parallel, we know that either the alternate interior, the corresponding angles are congruent, or the interior angles have to add up to 180 degrees, or the alternate exterior or alternate interior angles are going to be congruent. So in this case, in order for the lines to be parallel, we would know that y would have to be, ooh, that's a little big, congruent to z, like that. We could also say if z is congruent to w, they would be parallel. And we could also say they don't have these two any letter there for that, but if y plus whatever this one equaled 180, and there's a few other cases, but these are the most prominent ones because the letters are there. These are corresponding angles, and these are alternate exterior angles. So let's see if any of those are choices. So let's just shrink it back up. Let's look at our choices. So they're saying W equals Y. So there's W, there's Y. Well, that has nothing to do with line K, so that one is out. W congruent to Z. Now you can see right there, because they're alternate exterior, that they would be congruent. X and Z, X and X and Z are not, they would have to be adding up to 180, but they don't tell us any of those degrees. X plus Y equals 180. Well, they're not even on this line down here, so that would be out. So sometimes it's good to think about it first before you even look at your answer choices. Let's go to number 6. All right, so blood volume, blah, blah, blah. Which of the following expresses the hemocrit, which would be the H, in terms of the blood volume in the plasma, in the volume? Now, the more you do, the more you'll know how much you have to concentrate on the reading or how much you can just skip to what they're asking. A lot of reading here that was unnecessary. So this is basically solving in terms of other variables. So they want you, if you'll notice, all of these are solved by H. So if you look at your answer choices, you can say, okay, I am solving this for H. And then you just have to use some algebra to solve for H. These are one of my favorite problems, and they happen to be on the SAT, which is great. So I'm going to cross multiply. I'm going to take VB times 1, VB times H. So let's do that first. VB minus VB H equals VP. So just cross multiplied. I distribute it through as I went. Now we have to we're solving it for H, so we need to get the H by itself. Let's just do negative VBH equals VP minus VB. So I'm just subtracting that from both sides, and then I'm going to divide everything by negative VB. We're going to have to manipulate the signs a little bit when we check our answers. So these cross out, and so we get H equals, and I'm going to, it's going to be VB. You're going to have to look and try to figure out which choice arrange it in that way, but none of these look exactly like this. So what you can see here is this over this is going to be 1, right? So we're going to get 1 minus, because this over this would be VP over VB. A little tricky. The difficulty level here is hard, but if this is your kind of problem, then it's going to be more on the easy side for you. So when you get here, you need to look and see, how can I make these answer choices? Which one looks most like this answer choice? So this one is definitely out, right? This one has the 1, but it has the plus. See how I have this negative sign down there? And then this one does not have the 1 at all. So a little tough. All right, number 7. Must be on the next slide. All right, so difficult level for this one was medium. This is more equations to solve. So far it's not been too bad algebra-wise. So you're going to solve this equation. If you don't know how to solve it, you can totally plug these values in for x, because there's only one variable. You can plug it back in. You can put the 0 there, and you're going to find it doesn't work. I actually just solve them. I think it's the fastest way to do this, but if you do not know how to solve it, you can get by substituting the answer in to make sure that each side are the same. So let's just solve this thing. First thing I'm going to do, I think, is multiply by our common denominator, which is x plus 5. So I'm going to multiply this times x plus 5. So I'm just going to distribute this through. The x plus 5s, if I take it all by x plus 5, let's just put this here. X plus 5, and that wasn't working. I went too high. These are going to cross out, right? And these are going to cross out. So I'm going to distribute the 2 through, and this is going to be equals 1 times x plus 5 is x plus 5. And then these are going to cross out, so it's going to be minus 1. So we're going to get 2x plus 2 equals x plus 4. Subtract x from both sides, subtract 2 from both sides, and look at that, x equals 2. So if you were plugging in answers, you would have only had to get down to b to show that it's going to be the same on both sides. So that's just an option for you if you don't want to do the equation solving. Or if you want to double check, you could substitute it back in. All right, next one, number 8. Trying to get 10 done on this video. All right, which of the following is a solution to the equation above? It's harder to plug your answers in. You could try plugging that 2 in just to see if it works. That would be really easy to do it, but it doesn't work. So these are harder to plug in, though you could do it. Now, the first thing you want to do anytime you have a quadratic equation is you want to set it equal to 0. So I'm going to do that right up here. 2x squared. I'm going to subtract the 2x from both sides, and I'm going to subtract the 3 from the negative 2, and I'm going to get negative 5 equals 0. The second thing I would try is factoring it. So I did try factoring it. It does not factor. So you can try, factoring would look like where you would do 2 sets of parentheses equals 0. There's no combinations that give you the negative 2. You can kind of tell that when this didn't work. Do you see these radicals in your answer? That tells me I'm going to need to use the quadratic formula. So here we go. You need to know this. Hopefully you knew this. Negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Plug in your numbers. So x equals 2. Now let's just do this real quick. A equals 2, b equals negative 2, and c equals negative 5. If you don't know how to use the quadratic formula, this is something you definitely want to learn before you take the SAT. You want to put it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. It's in just standard form. So the a is the number before the x squared, the b is the number before the x, the c is the constant. Then you just plug it in. So the opposite of negative 2 is positive 2, plus or minus the square root of negative 2 squared would be 4, minus 4 times a times c all over 2 times a. And we don't have a calculator in this section, but I think you can do it. Plus or minus 4, and this would be 40. So it'd be 4 plus 40, and that would give you 44 over 4. Now you'll notice that's not an answer here. That means you have to simplify even further. So 44 is 4 times the square times, this breaks into 4 times 11. So you can take out, let's say I ran out of room. So you get x equals 2 plus or minus, now it would be the square root of 4, the square root of 11, right? I'm just putting in that extra step over 4. So it's x plus or minus equals 2 plus or minus 2 root 11 over 4. And then a 2 goes into all of these, so your final answer would be x equals 1 plus or minus square root 11 over 2. And they just want one of the solutions, so it's going to be this one. Now, they said the difficulty on this one was hard, but if you know how to use a quadratic formula, I don't think you would find it hard at all. So it does have a couple extra parts because you have to simplify the radical as well. So, all right, let's move on. Number 9. And this is kind of interesting. Well, not that interesting. This one says, which is not a factor of the polynomial above. So this one kind of is similar to, well, not really. It's not an equation, but this is a polynomial that we're going to factor because they're asking which one is not a factor. So we're going to get that down first, not a factor. So this is just a factoring problem. The difficulty is medium here. So we can take out an x. So we can't take out any numbers. Plus 11x plus 5. And then we have to know how to factor. And it has a coefficient in front of the x squared term, so that makes it a little bit harder. And but they're prime numbers, so there's not a lot of combinations. So we have 2 and 1, and then 5 and 1. You can play around with them, but the 5 ends up here, the 1 ends up here. They're both plus. Now we're looking, okay, here's a factor, so it's not that one. X plus 5 is a factor. 2x plus 1 is a factor, so this is the answer. So factors are just things you multiply together to give you what you originally started with. So when they're asking about not a factor, it means that the number's something that doesn't multiply together to give you what you started with. So that's that one. Okay, and the last one that we're going to do in this video is the graph in the xy plane of the linear function contains the point 3, 4. For every increase of 5 units in the x, f of x increases 3 units. Now remember, this is what messes people up, I think, on the SAT, because we don't normally talk in function notation, at least in Saxon books. So f of x is the same as y. So they're basically saying we have a linear function, which means it's going to be a line, and it has a point. And so they're basically saying if you had a graph, for every 5 that it goes this way, it's going to go up 3. So it's basically saying the slope is rise over run, right, is 3/5. Now you can basically stop here, because if you look, here's the slope -5, 3. No. Here's the slope -5, 3, 5. No, because it's a positive slope. It's for every 5 increasing on the x-axis, it goes up 3 on the y. This one works and this one doesn't, so by a process of elimination, I did this one. Now, if you want to be like you're guessing, questioning yourself, you can do y equals mx plus b. You can plug in the things like 4 equals the slope is 3/5, but why even do that when this is the only one with the right slope? And then you put in your 4, your 3, and then you find your b, which is going to be 11/5. Just too much work. Just try to, when you look at a problem, try to do it without doing maximum amount of work, because your time is an issue. So by process of elimination, this one worked. If there were more than 2 with the 3/5 as a slope, then you would need to do this and find b and find the right b. All right, so I'm going to close for now, and I'll pick up with problem 11 in the next video. Okay, this is number 11 on the May 2019 SAT. Now we're talking about a lot of functions on this test. I had several people tell me how many functions there were, and it's a weakness. So let's strengthen up this area of weakness. I would highly suggest that you watch Mario Math's Polynomials, Zeros, and Factors, I think it is called. So check that out, because it'll be really helpful. So this is a table of values. It says the table above gives selected values of a polynomial function. Based on the values in the table, which of the following must be a factor of p? Anytime you have a polynomial function, the place where it crosses the y-axis are called the zeros and also the factors. So I'm going to work forward and backwards on this one. It should be interesting. Okay, so if we were going to plot the points, so real quick, let's plot some of these points. So this is a polynomial. So it's going to be some sort of shape here. So let's just put these on. So we have -2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. We have -1, 0, which is a 0. We have 0, -3, and we have 1, -1, and we also have the 0, 2, 0. Now, the place where the polynomial crosses the x-axis is called the 0, because that's where y is 0. You can also figure out the factors by knowing where it crosses the x-axis. So it crosses the x-axis here at -1, right here, you can see that, and it also crosses at 2. So this is your 2. So if you know what you're doing, if after you watch the Mario video, it should be really quick, you can determine the factors are, it's always the opposite. It's x minus the 0. So x minus a -1 would be an x plus 1. X minus 2 would be x minus 2. And these are your factors. So this right here would be your answer. Now, I know that was a really fast explanation. If you know what you're doing, you can go that quickly. But if you don't, let's think about it another way. If this was multiplied out by foiling it, all right, so let's FOIL this out. So first would be x squared, outer -2, inner is just x, and then we have a -2. If we said solve this equation, you would factor it, right? And you would get x minus 2, x plus 1, and you would get x equals, when y equals 0, because this is the y, that would be your f of x, and which would be your y. When y is equal to 0, we have our solutions, which would be x equals 2 and x equals -1. But they're asking for factors. So if you have the solutions or the roots or the zeros, you can go backwards and determine the factors. So I really encourage you to watch that Mario video. It's going to be more in depth and a couple more illustrations to help you understand that. So let's go on to number 12. So this one is also hard, but it's not horrible. It just has this function notation in it again. It says the function g is defined by the equation above. Which of the following points in the xy plane is an x-intercept of the graph of the equation y equals g of y? I can understand why you probably missed this one. So they want you to find which of the following points is an x-intercept. Now, we just talked about an x-intercept. An x-intercept is when y is 0. So if we had our graph and we had a point, let's just put a point on here. Let's just call this, we'll just call this 1, 0. So an x-intercept is where y is 0. And just remember that this is the function, and we're going to set it equal to 0 because this is the y value, remember? This is going to be really helpful if you can keep in mind that this notation is the same as y. So when it is on the x-axis or an x-intercept, y is going to be 0. So I'm just going to set this whole thing equal to y. Instead of g of x, I'm going to put 0 because that's your y value. 2 to the x minus 2. So what would make that equal to, what value of x would make this equal to 0? Well, if x equals 1, it's going to be 2 to the 1 minus 2 does equal 0. So x has to be 1. So I'm going to look through here. When g of 1, when you put 1 in for x, you're going to get 1. So this is your value. Now, this notation right here, g of 1, it's basically saying when you put a 1 in for x. That one's a little tricky. And again, I would encourage you, if this is the kind of problem that you have trouble with, if you have trouble with the function problems, go to the Mario videos and watch the ones on functions. He does a little bit more explaining that. This one's tricky because of this notation and this notation, and you have to know that the x-intercept is when y equals 0. So when y is equal to 0, and this g of 1 is just saying, if we had a function like this, without going on too long, if we had g of 1 and you were supposed to find out, and if it said g of x equals x plus 2 or something like that, if you're finding g of 1, that means you're replacing the x with a 1. And that's what we did here. We replaced the x with a 1 right there, and we got out, and the x is a 1. So a little complicated. I don't know if I did the best job explaining it, but I really encourage you to watch the Mario videos on that one. All right, number 13. I actually don't have the correct answer even on here. It's hard to fit it on here. It says, which of the following graphs in the xy plane, which is the graph, which of the following is the graph of this given equation? Now, if I'm looking at that parabola, we have to know some things about parabolas. So if you have trouble with parabolas, watch the video on parabolas. But here's the deal. When you have a parabola, it's going to be in the form y equals ax squared plus bx plus c. Now in this case, there's no c because it's 0. That means where it's going to, the place when the x values are 0, it's going to cross the y-axis at c. So it's going to cross at 0. We know that. The other thing that we have to know that's really important is when this a value is negative, if this is negative, then your graph is going to be upside down. You know, sad, negative, sad. So when you're doing this problem, right away, you can see that it's a negative x squared, so you can go and eliminate some. Like I can say, nope, not you, because it's a happy parabola, and this one's a happy parabola. So then you have it eliminated, so you have a 50% chance of getting it right. The c value in a parabola is where it's going to, if x is 0, it's where it's going to cross the y-axis. So if we look, well, it's going to cross the y-axis at 0, and this one crosses the y-axis at 4. So this one is definitely out. And the one that I don't even have on here, because I cut it off, is going to look like this. It looks like this parabola. So that would be the answer. So the answer to this one would be D. You can also take a couple points and plug it in and see if it works. So, but the best way to know is, first thing is, if this is a negative value in front of the x squared term, it's going to be upside down. And you should know that the constant value tells you where it's going to cross the y-axis, because at that point, x is 0. Okay, watch the video on parabolas if you have trouble with this one. All right, some imaginary numbers. This one's hard, but I find imaginary numbers are pretty easy if you understand that I squared, they tell you that I equals the square root of -1. But if we square both sides of this, we're going to get I squared equals -1. So every place you see an I squared, you're going to put a -1. So I'm just going to do that right now. I squared right here is a -1. So I'm going to put -1. And that's a little sloppy. And this is the same thing. Negative I squared is just going to be I squared. So that's going to be -1. So the answer is -2. Yeah, that one was pretty easy if you understand that I squared equals -1. So you replace any I squareds with the -1. And they're calling this one hard. All right, moving on. Number 15. Turn the page here. So when we get to number 15, oh, we have one more difficult one. I didn't think this one was too bad, but okay. So 15, it says the dimensions of a right rectangular prism are 4 by 5 by 6 inches. What's the surface area of the prism? Okay, I took my, you know how well I can draw here. I made a prism. And we're finding the surface area, which means we're finding, this looks like a cube more than a prism, but it gives you the right idea. So I just put the sides on it. So we have one side's 4, one side's 5, and one side's 6. Just use your imagination. So we're trying to find the surface area. So what we need to do is find, there's a 5 by 4 side. How many 5 by 4 sides are there? There's a 6 by 5 sides. And there are, let's see, we have 5 by 4. This would be a 6 times 4 side. So we have all those sides, and we're just going to figure out each of them. So we have the 24. We have one down here. We have 2 of them. So we have 2 24 sides. We have 220, 2 with 5 by 4s. And we have 2, the back and the front would be 30. And we would just add those all up, and it's going to be 148. I'm not sure why this is a difficult problem, but that's it. So you just have to visualize it, draw as much as you can on the SAT. Okay, now we start all easy again. Whoops, no, forget it. I forgot about this guy. Whoops, never mind. It does start easy again. 15, let's go to 16. This is another easy one. I just have 3 on this page. Okay, so this is a solution. 16, this is a grid in. So because it's a grid in, it will start easy again at 16. So you just put the 2 in where the x is. So 3 times 2 is 6 plus y equals 29. So we get y equals 23. And 23 is the answer. Okay, go faster on those. All right, here we go. I didn't leave any space to do this problem. So pizza parlor sells pizza slices for $3 each, calzones for $4 each. A group of friends spend $51 on pizza slices and calzones at the parlor. If they bought 6 calzones, how many pizza slices did they need to buy? Okay, this one is it's like a coin problem, if you know how to do the coin problems, where you have a nickel's worth 5 cents, a dime's worth 10 cents. So you need a value equation, and you need one that just has the number of items that you're buying. So pizza, we're just going to call X for pizza, Y for calzones. So $3 times a piece of pizza and $4 times a calzone, and they spent a total of $51. This is your value one. Then we have our one that just talks about the number of orders. So they bought 6 calzones. Okay, this is even easier. So Y equals 6. They tell you that, and you have to figure out how many pieces of pizza. So you're just going to put that in for Y. So you're going to have 3x plus 24 equals 51, and you're going to get 3x equals 27, and you're going to divide by 3, and your answer to this one is 9. Okay, next problem is hard. So this one built up fast, a bunch of easy ones, and then we're moving on to this hard one. It says if air resistance is ignored, the function h defined above models the height above the ground in feet of to a toy rocket after t seconds after its launch from the roof of a building. Based on the model, what is the height above the ground in feet when the toy rocket 1 second after the launch? Well, they're basically saying when time is 1 second, what's the height going to be? So all you have to do is t equals 1. I'm not sure why this is a hard problem. And you're just going to put the 1 in where the t is, and you'll get your answer. So 16 times 1 squared plus 48 times 1 plus 72. This is a non-calculator problem, so they're not going to make the numbers extremely difficult. And when you add those all up, you get 104. And that's the answer to that one. Okay, we have 2 more to go. So here we go. This one is a little hard to see, but the points plotted in the coordinate plane represent the possible numbers of wallflowers and cornflowers that someone can buy at the garden store in order to spend $24 total on 2 types of flour. The price of each wallflower is the same and the price of each cornflower is the same. What is the price in dollars of 1 cornflower? Disregard the dollar sign when you're gridding in your answers. Okay, so this one is a little bit hard to see. But here I'm going to make 2 different equations. Well, you don't even need 2 equations. But here we can see when these are the combinations of, if you bought 0 cornflowers and 12 wildflowers, it would add up to $24. So we can already see the wallflowers are going to be $2. They want to know how much is the price of 1 cornflower. Also, like if you had 4 cornflowers and 9 wallflowers, it would add up to $24. So we have all these combinations. Any combination on this line is going to add up to $24. We want to know the number of cornflowers. So I'm just going to sneak right down here. And when you have 0 wallflowers plus 16 cornflowers, it's going to equal $24. All of these combinations add up to $24. So I'm just going to divide both sides by 16. Oops, that was a bad 16. So we're going to get the cornflower. Let's divide 8 into both of these. 8 goes into that one 3 times and 2 times. And so the answer is 1.5 or 3 halves. So $1.50 per each cornflower. They made it really easy here with having it come out at 0. If it didn't come out at 0, you would have to make 2 equations. You would have to say something like 4 times cornflowers plus 9 wildflowers equals 24, and then 12 cornflowers plus whatever that is, 3 wallflowers equals 24 and solve them simultaneously. But they didn't even make it that hard. Okay, the last one, which I super enjoy. If you understand exponents, then this is an easy problem. Or not just exponents, but fractional exponents. So I'm going to take the left side and write them as fractional exponents. So we're going to rewrite the radical with fractional exponents. Remember, whatever's on the seat goes on the bottom. So the 2 is on the seat, so it goes on the bottom, and you have a 5 all over. The 3 is on the seat, so it goes on the bottom, and 4. And you have to know that when you're dividing, you subtract your exponents. So it's going to be x to the 5/2 minus 4/3. And so we're going to get x to the, all right, because I have to do this. We have to find a common denominator. I was just looking, I had already done this problem so that I didn't have to redo this here. Okay, so we're going to change them into sixths, so we can subtract them. So 2 goes in 6 3 times, it's 15 sixths. It's getting a little messy here. It's going to be 8. So if we subtract 15 minus 8, we're going to get 7 sixths, and it equals x to the a over b. So a over b have to be equal to make these two sides equal to 7 sixths. So your answer is 7 over 6. So that does it for section 3 of the test in May 2019.